My friends, welcome to this episode of the Outdoor Gear Review. I hope you all are doing well. What I have here is one of the worst alcohol stoves that I've seen in a really long time. This is from a company called Red Camp. This is a Chinese company. Basically, they just relabel products. You could find this exact stove with all of the components from other companies as well. The only difference is the logo, that's it. With this kit, this is what you receive. An alcohol stove, which is a Trangia ripoff and a rather poor performing one. And you receive this here. This is a base plate with like pot supports. As you can see here, this is rather strange, right? You have the pot supports, you have these folded pieces of metal here, you have this hole. The company claims that you can use this with your alcohol stove in 4 different setups. In truth, it takes quite a bit of fiddling to use this base plate, this pot support. And in this episode, I'll be showing you why and how that is. You receive this storage bag, which is a velvety 2-pool solution. It's okay, it's not bad. I've definitely seen worse. So this here is your snuffer. You can use this to put out the flame, and you can also use this to simmer with. This top lid rotates just like that. And with this, you can adjust how much heat is coming through. So let's say if you want to simmer something, you could do that with this lid. Next, you have the cap for the stove itself. On the inside, you do have a silicone O-ring, and that prevents fuel from leaking out. So let's say that you use this stove to make a cup of coffee, and let's say you have some excess fuel left over. You can snuff it out, then you can put the lid on, screw it, and the fuel will not come out. And then lastly, we have the stove itself. This is made from brass, and this is made from aluminum. While I get the stove going, I'll go over some stats as well. As far as the dimensions go for this stove with the stand, it is 3.7 inches wide and it stands 2.6 inches tall. The weight of this entire kit is 5 ounces. 3.8 ounces for the stove, 1.2 for the stand. It is available in 3 colors, green, silver, and black. And the cost of this at the time of filming is $18. Overall, the capacity of the stove is around 4 ounces of fuel. And when it comes to the performance, you're about to see how well it performs on average. I'm going to start a stopwatch here, so you all can get a good idea of how well this performs. 2 cups of water. Let's see how long it takes. I promise you, it's gonna be a long time. I have put up a windscreen, and that's because this stove needs one. The company claims that the stand, the base plate, is a windscreen. Not true at all. It does nothing. The performance of the stove in general is so poor, without a windscreen, you may not get your water to boil at all. Again, when it comes to the performance of this, it's rather poor. I have read of some people making modifications to the stove, such as making the burn holes larger on the stove itself. That's not something that I would recommend. The stove's not very good. The stand is not very good. There's really no reason to purchase this stove and to make modifications. You would be better off buying a Trangia stove and getting a different type of stand and windscreen. We're now at 8 minutes, 10 seconds. I'm seeing some steam, and I'm hearing a little bit of commotion coming from the water and from the kettle. As you all saw there, it took 9 minutes, 32 seconds to boil 2 cups of water. For an alcohol stove, that performance is just so-so. And you have to keep in mind, everyone, this is like the best set of conditions possible. The water is fairly warm, it's been in the vehicle, which has been out in the sun. Today, there's not much of a breeze, and in truth, it's not that cold. An example of the stove in slightly worse conditions, I've had instances where it took over 20 minutes to boil 2 cups of water with this stove, which translates to very poor performance even for an alcohol stove. Comparing the performance of the Red Camp stove to the stove that I recently reviewed, the Evernew Titanium DX set, the Evernew stove would boil 2 cups of water in the same conditions in roughly 4 minutes. This is 9.5 minutes. That's a huge difference between these two stoves. And it all boils down to, no pun intended, to the design of the stove itself. The holes here that go along the top of this are very small. And actually, now that I'm looking at it, I can see that with each of the holes, they're drilled in different places, different locations along this rim. And there's quite a bit of denting here too. In general, it just translates to a very poorly designed and made stove. We'll put the lid on here. That features the O-ring. You can see it does not leak. That's good. I'll tell you what, everyone, let's just wrap this up. Let's move to the pros and cons and get this over with. Pro number 1 is the capacity of this stove. Roughly 4 ounces of fuel will fit inside of this, and that translates to a rather long burn time, roughly 40 minutes, depending on if you're simmering or going all out. Another pro for this stove is that a lid is included, and it is tight. No fuel will leak out of this. Also, you have the snuffer, which can be used to simmer as well. These are nice features to have with an alcohol stove, and they're features that are not included with all alcohol stoves. Continuing to talk about this base plate here, it is quite substantial. It's more substantial than I thought it would be, based upon the pictures on Amazon. The construction's good, there's no sharp edges, nothing like that. It's good. Not great. Another pro is that a storage bag is included. And the last pro that I have for this set is the low price. At $18, that's okay. And with that, my friends, it takes us over to the cons. The first con that I have for this stove is this stand here. You're about to see that the company claims 4 different methods of use, but that's not really true. There's only 3. The 4th method is quite dangerous, as you're about to see. In general, this is very fiddly. Using this with this stove, there's so much fiddling to it. So check this out, everyone. The company says you could use this stove like this, and that involves taking the stove and laying it completely flat on the bottom here, just like this. That's how I boiled the water in the kettle today. Problem number 1 with this, look at that. It's very, very slick down there. So if you're not careful, you can easily bump this one side to the other, and you're not evenly going to distribute the flame, the heat from the stove. That is method number 1. That's where you have the stove underneath these supports. Method number 2 is to put the stove on top of these supports. That is not easy to do. In fact, it's not really all that easy to get the stove in and out. Very fiddly, as I said before. You have to get the stove underneath those supports or on top of them. So getting the stove to sit on top of those supports, it too is not easy, because those supports are very small. There's not much leeway here. This, in my opinion, is nonsensical. The stove simply falls off. You really cannot use this. Using it in this way is just simply dangerous. The next use case is to flip the stove over and use it like this. So just like that. The stove really doesn't perform that well with this covering up the flame holes. The majority of your heat and flame contacts the base plate instead of the bottom of your pot. That does not make much sense. And lastly, the company says that you can use it like this. So you put down the stove, you put this on top. This does work, but it's not going to work with all pots, all cups, all pans. Let me show you why. Kettle, yes. 750 milliliter pot, no. I guess you can shove it in there like that, but that's not very stable. That's fairly dangerous. Small cup. Again, the answer is no. You might be able to get it to, yeah, there you go. I barely have it sitting on those small legs down there. Again, folks, that's a bad idea. It's unsafe. Don't do it. I should mention this. If you plan to use the stove like this, with this on top, this surface is very slick. Also, when it comes to the pot supports up at the top, even though there is some jimping here, it's not very good, it's not very grippy on your pots. In general, this flat out sucks, to be honest with you. I truly do not understand where the company was going with this. If there was a piece of metal kind of jutting out from the sides here, that would allow for the use of any size pot, cup, pan. That would make much more sense, but as is, it doesn't. This is very poorly thought out, and it's not worth your money. Moving on with my list of cons, this base plate offers very little in terms of wind resistance. This is not a windscreen, it's not a wind block. The company says it is, it's not. This performs extremely poorly in that regards. Next, folks, we talked about the overall performance of this stove. It's not very good. It is definitely below a Trangia. It's definitely below other higher end alcohol stoves that are out on the market. Ultimately, the performance of this is merely okay. Okay at best. And right there you have it. Those are the pros and cons that I have for the Red Camp stove. In the end, do not waste your money on this. The overall performance is not that great. The stand is pretty awful. It's not worth your money. There are better solutions out there. This is pretty bad. It really is. In the end, everyone, I'm glad that I reviewed this product. I'm glad that I tested it out. That way, you all know for certain not to waste your money on this. Alcohol stoves are a dime a dozen. You can make your own. Even from the homemade ones, the performance can be very, very good. This sucks. Plain and simple, this stove sucks. Don't buy it. Don't purchase any of the other versions of this stove either. They are the exact same. The least expensive one that I've seen is around $12. If this is the first alcohol stove that you've ever used, you may think the performance isn't that bad, that the stand isn't that bad, but as you get some experience under your belt, you will see very quickly this is pretty awful. That is my review. I'm sticking to it. Make sure to comment down below and share your thoughts. What do you all think about the Red Camp alcohol stove set? This thing. This makes no sense to me. What were they thinking? I have no idea. Yeah, I don't know. Hit the like button before you go. It does help the channel. Everyone, take care. Be well. Make sure to comment down below. That helps too. Strength and honor, folks. Bye for now.